Welcome to the Athletic Hockey Show. I'm Julian McKenzie alongside Mark Lazerus. Ian Mendez is not here. He's in Sweden. We'll have him back later this week. We have a bunch of different topics that we're going to get to on today's show. We're going to talk about, we're going to have Daniel Nugent-Bowman, who is our Edmonton Oilers writer, talk about the latest with the Edmonton Oilers. We're going to have a conversation between Mike Russo and Minnesota Wild GM Bill Guerin. We'll talk about some potential changes for 3-on-3 in overtime in the NHL. But we begin with a developing story. A man has been arrested for in connection to the on-ice death of Adam Johnson. You may remember this story from a couple weeks ago. Adam Johnson, a former NHLer, playing in England, unfortunately losing his life after a skate rose up and cut him in the neck. A man has since been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter in connection to the incident. Mark, I know a bit of a tough one for us to start here, but I would just like to know your thoughts on the fact that we're at this point with this story where an arrest has been made. It should be pointed out we have not seen any charges as of yet. It is just an arrest to this point.
Yeah, I think anyone who had the unfortunate experience of watching that video of the skate cut of Adam Johnson probably saw this coming. I mean, it looked really bad, and we don't know if there was a skate clipping another skate, which is why his leg went up so high. And I mean, we don't know how this is going to play out, but it's just a reminder that what happens on the ice isn't necessarily, excluded from the law of the land, right? I mean, we saw this with Todd Bertuzzi when he had his horrible hit on Steve Moore. Criminal charges were filed against him. There was a civil lawsuit that I believe was settled out of court. It's one of those things where the question is there an assumed risk when you step onto a playing field, when you step onto a basketball court, when you step onto a football field, when you step onto the ice? This is a violent game, and there is absolutely assumed risk. If you take a slap shot to the face and you suffer serious injury because of it, is the person who took that shot liable? These are the questions you have to ask. This is I don't think anybody thinks there was intent here, but is there liability in keeping control of your the dangerous weapons that are attached to the bottom of your feet in hockey? That's the issue that's at play here. And the fact that this is happening in England, I don't know what the law is there. Like, I honestly don't know how they perceive incidents like this. So it's going to be fascinating to watch this play out, because you can see both sides of it pretty easily.
Yeah, my whole thing, I unfortunately ended up seeing the video surface on social media a couple weeks ago, and I just can't help but just feel for Johnson's family, and also just note how much of a freak accident it was. We don't normally see, I mean, to get to a point where a skate will make an impact like that. There have been other stories like with what happened with Richard Zednik a couple of years ago, or Clint Malarchuk a couple of decades earlier. This seems like it's in the same vein, where it's just a freak accident and an unfortunate situation. At least that's how I see it. I mean, I'm not in law enforcement, but I just have a hard time just reconciling with the fact that we're at this point, considering that, at least to my eyes, this is a freak accident. This is not something that was intentional. But of course, again, this is just my opinion.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm assuming, again, not a legal expert here, dumb hockey writer guy here, but manslaughter is not the same thing as murder one either. The question is, are you at all times responsible for the life-threatening weapons on the soles of your feet when you play hockey? If you get checked into the boards and your feet fly up in the air and someone gets clipped in the face, are you responsible for that? These are the questions that need to be answered by the legal process here. And, when I talked to Haley Wickenheiser right after the incident happened, and she's an emergency physician and one of the greatest hockey players who ever lived. So maybe as, excuse me, as qualified as anybody to talk on this. And she took issue with the word freak accident, that term, because she kept seeing it. And she said, these are not freak accidents. They happen all the time. They just don't always end in tragedy. Jason Dickinson took one on the collarbone last year, and he thought for a minute that it was his jugular vein, basically, and he got lucky. There's you can go back and find a clip. I think it was in 2009 where Ben Eager's skate caught Adam Burish in the throat, like right across the throat. And if it was 2 millimeters deeper, who knows what happens? There are incidents all the time. Jason Dickinson's skate hit Jacob Lauka in the face, caught him in the eye, almost narrowly avoided taking guy's eye out.
That was this season.
That was just a couple of weeks. That was like a week before the Adam Johnson incident. So it's not that rare. It's just, guys get lucky a lot. Let's face it. Guys are getting away. They're fortunate to get away from these incidents with, their livelihood, let alone their lives. And, I don't know what the accountability is. If you're a baseball pitcher and you hit a guy in the head and, seriously injure or even kill him, are you responsible? Because you were the one who threw that ball. Even if there's an assumed risk, I don't think these guys necessarily sign waivers to play in the NHL, right? Like when you go to the trampoline park, like there's an assumed risk, but I don't think it's written in paper that that they give away any rights they have to their own safety.
I'm curious too if it gets to a point where there could be charges, or if it does get further, if this ends up being a case of precedent. In this case, since this is happening in the United Kingdom, I mean, that's their own standard, and I don't expect that to be applicable for North American law. But just this is going to be a really interesting situation with regards to this unfortunate situation, obviously, for Adam Johnson and his family. And the fact that we have reached this point, it's I mean, obviously, we're going to keep talking about it here on the Athletic Hockey Show and all throughout the network, but this is just something that I'm still very surprised about at this point, to be honest with you.
And you have to wonder about, the man who's arrested. We're not using his name because the UK police did not use his name, but the obviously he's not the victim here, obviously, but
right.
He has got a heavy burden that he'll be dealing with for the rest of his life here, regardless of the legal ramifications, regardless of any lawsuits that come. He's already been the subject of all kinds of abuse online, like really ugly, hateful, horrible stuff. And for the rest of his career, he's going to be tied to this. And there is absolutely a mental toll, an emotional toll that's going to be taken on him. His career obviously is going to be affected. And now he's got it. Now he's dealing with this. And, hey, it happened. And like I said, you have to be responsible for yourself. He made a reckless play, regardless of the intent, but he'll be paying it for a long time now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that one. A bit of a rough one for us to start on the Athletic Hockey Show, but I'm glad that we were able to spend some time and talk about this. And of course, we will continue to follow it as it develops with regards to the arrest made in connection to the death of Adam Johnson by an unfortunate skate accident. There's a few other topics I would like to see us get through before we get to, let's see if we can get to at least one or two before we bring on Daniel Nugent-Bowman, who covers the Edmonton Oilers for us here at The Athletic. This past weekend, we just had the Hockey Hall of Fame induction celebrations, some candidates getting in. I don't have the full list in front of me, but some really big names, obviously. Caroline Ouellette, the big women's hockey superstar, Henrik Lundqvist, Pierre Lacroix, big exec, who won Stanley Cups with the Colorado Avalanche in there, Ken Hitchcock, legendary NHL coach as well, part of that group, Mike Vernon, Tom Barrasso as well, part of that long list.
It's really a hall of very good, my friend. My God, the names that we're.
That's how you feel about it.
I really do.
That's how you feel about it.
I hate being that guy and like just stomping on people's moments. But Tom Barrasso, really? Mike Vernon, really? And Eric Duhachik will slap me around for saying that. And but I just Pierre Turgeon. I'm biased. I grew up an Islanders fan. I loved Pierre Turgeon as a kid. Of course, he should get into my mind. But I don't understand how we're getting some of these guys in. But Alex McGillney's not in. Steve Larmer's not in. Natalie Darwitz is not in. There's 2 slots for women every year, and we can't fill them after years of not putting women in the Hall of Fame. Like, it's absolutely inexcusable that Jennifer Botterill and Natalie Darwitz and so many others are not in the Hall of Fame yet. Like, look, the Hall of Fame committee is like the secret cabal of like 15 people in a room somewhere, and I just wish there were more transparency, because this is not yielding the Hall of Fame that I want to see personally. We're lowering the bar for some and we're raising the bar for others. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, well, clearly your standards are.
And put Yager in already. He's playing like 10 games a year because he owns the team and needs to sell tickets. Just put him in already.
All right, Mark Lazerus clearly fired up to start off our athletic hockey show here on a
For
Tuesday. Here,
God's
let me just
sake.
let me just focus on Jaromir Jagr for a second. There is still that 3-year wait period that will start essentially when Jaromir Jagr eventually retires. I agree with you. I think at this point he's not going to play an
He's
NHL
not coming
game.
back to the league. Yeah.
What are we doing? Like, why are we at a point where we're
I was
waiting to put this guy in? Like, we should be just putting him in.
I was out in Prague for the Blackhawks opener a few years ago in 2019, and I took a side trip up to Kladno, and I actually spent some time with Jagr at that rink. And he's the most harried, busiest man I've ever seen. Like, he's literally running the team. Like, he doesn't just own the team; he actually runs the team. He has no staff at all. He had to run back to Prague that day to pick up a visa for one of his players. Like, he doesn't even have like an assistant to run menial task errands for him. And he's playing because he has no choice. Like, it doesn't really seem like he wants to play. He has to play because it sells tickets, and he's trying to keep the team alive. He's doing it for his own business, and he's doing it for the town because there's not a whole lot there besides Kladno in the town, the hockey team. It's just ridiculous not to put him in the Hall of Fame. The guy's not coming back to the NHL. Even Jaromir Jagr's not coming back at 52. Make an exception. They made an exception for Gretzky. You can make an exception for Jagr. He's one of the 10 greatest players who ever lived. This is stupid.
So what would you say to people who would hear that and say, well, of course they waived it for Wayne Gretzky. He's the greatest player who ever lived. And even though Jaromir Jagr is one of the greatest players who ever lived, he's technically still not on that level of a Wayne Gretzky. Like, you're technically lowering the bar in a weird way.
When was the last time he was in the NHL? It's been long enough. Nobody cares that he's in the Czech Extraliga screwing around with a weighted vest on during practices. Like, it's a great story, but he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He's not.
For what it's worth, I agree with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate. He's still technically able to play.
He is technically ineligible for the Hall of Fame still. Technically correct is the best kind of correct. I know. But come on, man. Like, this has gone far enough. He's been away from the league long enough. Do we have to wait until he's 65? Because Jaromir Jagr might freaking play until he's 65 years old.
Okay, I want to take advantage of this energy that you got here, and I want to go through Eric Duhacek's column, who has the best chance at the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2024, examining the best candidates. There's a couple names that are listed here that I would love to get your opinions on. I would love to start with one name on another show I was debating with a couple other colleagues, Pekka Rinne, who has a career .917 career save percentage, 369 career wins, which, if memory serves, is 8 wins more than Carey Price, who I'm sure will be considered for the Hockey Hall of Fame once his time in the NHL.
If you win gold medals for Canada, you get in no matter what. That's all you guys care about.
I feel like there's some shade with the fact that you don't appreciate the fact that Canada, at least for the time being, is still a superior hockey playing country to the Americans. I gotta say, you got to throw your shade somewhere else, man. There's a lot of anger. I'm just saying,
you guys put too much stock into the international stuff sometimes.
Anyway, speaking of international stuff, Pekka Rinne has a silver medal at the 2014 World Championships, 4-time All-Star. Is Pekka Rinne, in your mind, a Hockey Hall of Famer? I have another name after this, but I'm curious about Pekka.
Here's how I look at it. Pekka Rinne, I love Pekka Rinne. He was a great guy to deal with. He's a phenomenal goalie. He should not be in the Hall of Fame, but if you're going to let guys like Mike Vernon and Tom Barrasso in, then yeah, Pekka Rinne. This is the problem. When the Baseball Hall of Fame let Bill Mazeroski in, like, it was all bets were off. Like, all right, we're just letting in anyone with a 262 average and pretty good glove in there. Like, we've lowered the bar so far now in the Hockey Hall of Fame. As a producer Jeff points out, it's not the NHL Hall of Fame, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. I get it. Yeah. But we've lowered the bar so much now that I don't know how you leave a Pekka Rinne out. But then again, how is Alex McGillney not in there? How is Steve Larmer not in there? How is Jennifer Botterill? There's so little consistency in what we're doing here. It just seems to be that if like 4 dudes in Canada love you a lot, you're going to get into the Hall of Fame. Like, that's what it feels like right now.
You keep throwing shade on Canada. What is this?
I'm just saying. It's just, I don't understand what the rationale is. There's so little transparency as to how, we've done the Shadow Hall of Fame that Eric Duhacek, who was actually on the committee for years, one of the most respected guys in the world, like one of the great hockey historians ever, like the nicest guy in the world. We all love Hat. He kind of runs this Shadow committee that we do. And even we can't come up with a consistent names, right? Like we got Darwitz and Botterill in a couple of years ago. I tried to get Steve Larmer in. I think he's a no-brainer. And yet You got 0 votes 2 straight years. So like we all have our own standards. And the problem is it's inconsistently applied. That's all. Pick a bar and stick it there.
Well said, Mark. We are going to move on to Daniel Nugent-Bowman, who covers the Edmonton Oilers for us here at The Athletic. He's standing by, waiting to hop in with us. We got a ton of questions we got to ask him about the Edmonton Oilers in these last few days. A lot of changes, a lot to talk about. DNB,
why? What happened?
Yeah, what happened, DNB? Thanks so much for kicking it with Mark and myself. Do we have him?
I don't know what happened. You tell me. I feel like so much has happened that I can't even wrap my head around it. Really. Where do you want to start?
Okay, I mean, we have to start with Jay Woodcroft. We have to get to the point where he loses the game with the Edmonton Oilers as head coach against the San Jose Sharks. I think, you know what? Let's start at that night, because so many people were looking at that game. Even last week, Ian Mendez and I were saying you got to circle that game as like the game of the week. And if the Oilers lose, chaos ensues. At the final horn, what did you think about Jay Woodcroft's future as head coach at that point?
I thought he would be gone the next day. Quite honestly, I was very surprised that he wasn't. But by the way that Ken Holland and management, which really goes down to Jeff Jackson, I'm quite confident he's the one who truly made this move. The way they explained it takes time to get a new guy in there. So clearly they had made the decision at that point to fire Jay Woodcroft and his right-hand man, Dave Manson, former NHL defenseman. When it comes down to that game, I don't recall, aside from a big playoff loss or, a season-ending playoff loss, I don't recall the mood in a dressing room being so despondent, so confused. I mean, all the players that we spoke to after that game struggled to find answers to pretty seemingly basic questions. It was so perplexing to them that they were in this situation, with 2 wins through their first 12 games. So I don't think the whole situation, falls on the feet of Jay Woodcroft. If you look at the underlying numbers, they had a league worst save percentage, and we're shooting. Their shooting percentage was second worst in the league at 5-on-5. I mean, what coach can outdo those types of numbers? Now, obviously, with the system changes that Woodcroft put in place, I think he's got to bear some of the responsibility here for sure. But if the Oilers had done nothing the rest of the way, logic dictates that they would be in a pretty decent spot, just given that the natural course of action would take its place and these numbers would improve. The Oilers, given that they're in a win-now scenario with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in their prime and at the end of their contract, didn't have the ability to wait any longer, and ultimately the moves were made.
What do you make of the Ken Holland saying he consulted leaders, and then Jeff Jackson saying, no, we didn't do that, and then Connor McDavid saying, no, they didn't do that? Is that just a sign that Ken Holland is not in charge here?
Yes, and that he's losing power by the day. That's one thing. Ken Holland is a Hockey Hall of Fame general manager, won 3 Stanley Cups as a general manager, another one as an assistant general manager. They're letting him ride off into the sunset here. His contract expires at the end of June, and there's almost no way he will be back as general manager for next season. Now, both things can be true. Ken Holland is one of the most kind of in-the-room general managers of any in the league. He's on almost every road trip. He does consult with his players. And I've reported, he talked a lot to Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid was somebody that said, hey, can we keep Warren Fogle around? Here's why. Holland ultimately listened to him. Connor McDavid wanted Connor Brown on this team, his junior teammate, as somebody who could be a low-cost option, in the top 6 and be a veteran guy that can play 2 ways. Connor Brown's on this team. But is Ken Holland going to McDavid and the leadership group and saying, should we be firing a coach? I'm not as sure about that. Ken Holland likes to gauge the temperature of the team, but I don't think he's necessarily making every decision or every important decision based on that. But Jeff Jackson goes another way, and I think both things can be true. Ken Holland can talk to the players, but maybe not as about the key critical aspects of a team. And Jeff Jackson is the one making the call, and he didn't do that.
Is it not weird that a player of Connor's caliber, of such importance to the organization, doesn't get a say on who the next coach could be, or if Jay Woodcroft should be the guy to go? And I mean, of all people for them to hire in his place, like you mentioned all the connections that he's had with players who have been added to the team, including Connor Brown, who he played with in Erie. To have his Erie Otters coach come in and for him to not have a say and him to be blindsided, is that not strange?
I would say, like, there's a couple different things at play here, right? Does Connor McDavid not have any idea that things are going badly? Of course he does. Of course the coaching change could come. He is a guy that I think will play, as I put in a piece late last night, piece of, he's a guy that would play for, a three-eyed, green-faced alien if that could get the Oilers, in a better position to be a true Stanley Cup contender. So I don't think he cares necessarily who the coach was. He doesn't like the narrative and the perspective out there that he's the one calling the shots. And I don't think he is. I mean, he's going to have a say, like I said. He's going to be, in the loop to some degree, maybe not necessarily about this. But he's going to have a say in what happens to some degree in the organization. He's not the one calling the final shot. There's a huge coincidence, obviously, that Kris Knoblauch was his junior coach. That was more than 8 seasons ago. Kris Knoblauch and Jeff Jackson also have a very, very good relationship dating back to, obviously, to Erie. And Jeff Jackson has a ton of respect for him. And look at the way Jeff Jackson basically got him a signature, who's become rather a signature NHL client, at least when he was an agent, in Alex DeBrincat. So there was a lot of ties there that go beyond Connor McDavid and to a less extent Connor Brown. He's also here as a former Erie Otter that played under Kris Knoblauch. But there's to say McDavid doesn't have a say or have any idea what's going on around here. It's simply not true. But the fact that to say that he's calling the shots, I think is overblown and quite frankly not true either. So there's a bit of a gray area, but Connor McDavid is clearly what happens with this Oilers team.
So how did Kris Knoblauch fix Connor McDavid so fast? He looked good last night. So it was like magic.
That old Erie magic, I guess. No,
must be,
I
right?
mean, Connor McDavid. Like, it's Connor McDavid. He's going to come out, and I know. Like, I had a chance to talk with him on the road last Friday. He says he's not hurt. I just the way he's playing, like, it's clear that he hasn't been 100% since he got hurt there a few weeks ago and came back ahead of the Heritage Classic. I mean, that was his first goal in 9 games for a guy that scored 64 last year. That was a runaway Art Ross, winner for again. It's something that's almost unfathomable the way he's played. I mean, it's not just the fact that he hasn't scored. I mean, his expected goals rate, it's one of the worst on the team. And you don't expect that to continue with Connor McDavid. So whether it was Kris Knoblauch behind the bench last night, still had been Jay Woodcroft, or it had been me, I think there would have been a way to get Connor McDavid going in a relatively quick fashion. And it got going last night. I mean, the other one, we talked a lot about Connor McDavid, but Leon Draisaitl, that might have been his best game, aside from cross-checking somebody in the back of the leg and getting a fine. But he had a goal and 3 assists. That was somebody who also wasn't going. He scored last night. It was his second goal in 11 games. So, I mentioned huge droughts for 2 guys that are perennial, or at least Draisaitl's case, a perennial 50-goal guy, and McDavid, who scored 60 last year. The Oilers are going to have, based on their history, are going to have a lot of trouble winning hockey games without those 2 producing, and that was the case early in the year.
DNB, appreciate you hanging out with Mark and myself on the Athletic Hockey Show. Looking forward to your coverage on the Edmonton Oilers as it goes. I'm sure we will be talking about them again at some point. Thanks so much, man.
Of course. I think there'll be more to write about.
Oh, I think so. Daniel Nugent-Bowman of The Athletic. Thanks again, man.
It's funny covering it. It's funny covering a team that's just in a total disarray like that. Like, you come in, I was just talking to DNB yesterday. It's like, you come into the season with all these great story ideas that you're looking forward to, you were thinking about all summer long that I'm going to get to, all these great features you're going to write, and then it just becomes a total shit show right off the bat, and that's all you can write about. And then the new coach comes in, and that's all you can write about for a while. It'll be like mid-January before he can actually do his job the way he wants to. We've all been there.
I feel I can sympathize with that. Obviously, not to the same level. But yeah, with the Calgary Flames, obviously they're going through what they're going through. I have all these different ideas I want to do. Probably not till January at this point. Who knows? I'm just messing around here. But yeah, just couldn't imagine being in Alberta. I mean, yes, I'm in Alberta, but like couldn't imagine being in Edmonton right now. I'm not in Alberta at this moment, but could you imagine being an Oilers fan? Could you imagine having all of these hopes, thinking, okay, this is the year you're going to put it all together. You're in the Cup final, and you are at such a disadvantage to start with everything that can go wrong. It just does.
Dude, I'm a Mets fan. I can very much imagine that.
Oh, that's true. I'm so sorry.
My deepest condolences on your fandom.
My deepest condolences to everyone. We will get to, in a couple of minutes, a really fascinating conversation between Mike Russo and Bill Guerin, the Minnesota Wild GM. Got a couple minutes before we get there. I know we kind of talked about the Global Series games, all these teams playing in Sweden. It's not really, I mean, I don't think it's going to really move the needle that much for me. Like, I'm just curious about what you think about it, Laz.
It's one of those things where they do it not for the fans back home. They do it for the fans over there. But I don't like Sweden's a hockey crazy country to begin with. Is that the place you need to quote unquote grow the game? Are there Swedish hockey fans unaware of the NHL? Like it feels like it's throwing them a bone, which is great. I don't know how much this costs the league. Probably a fair bit. I know it costs our company a lot of money to send a lot of writers over there.
Yes.
It's fun. It's cool. Like there's no harm in it. I don't know how much it really does move the needle, though. I think when you hold games in other countries that aren't hockey hotbeds, that's when things get interesting. Like when the Blackhawks had a preseason game in Berlin. Germany's a growing hockey country, but it's not like a hockey obsessed culture. So that was kind of cool to do that. The Australia thing was sort of ridiculous, but also really cool. It's tough to sell preseason hockey. Like it would be great if you can get like actual NHL games over there. But it's a nice thing to do. The players, from that country appreciate it. They get excited to go over there. The fans over there will appreciate it. Is it going to make the league much money? Is it going to make a difference in the size of the fan base globally? Probably not. But it's a cool thing to do. It's a way to break up the monotony. I'm ambivalent about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat. I mean, for me at this point, it's if something fascinating happens, a lot of Leafs fans are wondering if that is going to be the time when the Leafs decide to announce an extension for William Nylander. He gets to play in his home country, and then all of a sudden he gets this new contract as he continues this point streak. That would be wild too if that point streak that he's on, I think it's at 15 games now, that continues over for however many games he get to play out in Sweden. That'd be a fun story to do as well. But yeah, if the players were in it, I'd care a little bit more. But to your point, Mark, you are absolutely right. It's definitely something that if you're in the market or your teams are there, you definitely care about a little bit more. It just kind of sucks that like we're at that point where because of just the nature of these games, it just feels so regional, whether it's a global series game or winter classic stuff or the Heritage Classic. Like, I don't know, like other sports seem to find a way to have these one-off events and everyone's able to like care about them. But for the NHL, it's just,
well, that's the NHL, right? Like
that's what it is, right?
I always say Chicago is a great Blackhawks town, but it's not really a hockey town. Like once the Blackhawks are eliminated from playoff competition, like when they were in the playoffs, they got eliminated. Nobody was watching the Stanley Cup final afterwards. It's not like Buffalo or Minnesota. Like there's very few American places where you are a NHL fan. There are huge hockey fans everywhere in the United States and all across North America, but it's very tribal. It's very regional. It's a regional city. You are a fan of the San Jose Sharks. You don't watch a Bruins Capitals game on prime time. That's why the ratings are so poor. That's why the league, TNT and ESPN and NBC Sports before them always wanted Pittsburgh and Chicago and Buffalo and New York and Boston and DC, all these big fan bases. They wanted those games on, not because they attracted people from outside of those cities, but because it attracted those cities. And they just come in with a higher floor. I mean, you're getting 400,000 people watching some of these games. This is not a national sport in the United States, at least. And Canada doesn't have the kind of population to make, to counter that. So it's always a regional niche sport that way. And there are exceptions. Again, Minnesota, Boston, Buffalo, great hockey areas. But for the most part, you're a fan of your team. And while anyone will watch the Bills play, who'd the Bills play yesterday? I already forgot.
They played the Denver Broncos yesterday.
Right.
They lost.
You'll watch Bills Broncos because it's the NFL and everybody watches every NFL game. People don't do that with hockey.
Very well said. And with that, we're going to transition over to our conversation. Mike Russo's conversation with Minnesota Wild GM Bill Guerin. Sit back and enjoy, everybody.
Be joined by Bill Guerin, the Wild general manager, 4-time Stanley Cup champion, 2 as a player, kind of bookended your career, and 2 as a assistant GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Global Series time, Detroit Red Wings, Toronto Maple Leafs, Ottawa Senators, Minnesota Wild going over to Sweden, 2 games against the Maple Leafs and Ottawa Senators. How long was this in the works? Was this something that, because originally I heard that you guys were maybe even in the works for Australia, but next thing you know, it was Sweden.
Yeah, I knew we were in kind of the mix for one of them, but I'm happy it's this one with all the Swedish players that we have. I think it'll be really exciting, and Zuki too. Close to Norway, so I think it'll be really exciting. And I think they're fun. They help the game. They help the league. They help our brand. But we just want to make sure that we don't forget that we're going over for 2. This is not an exhibition. These are 2 regular season games, and we need the points.
Yeah, they always say, Eriksson Ek says that Swedes are a lot like Minnesotans. Everybody in Minnesota thinks Minnesota is the best state in the country, and everybody in Sweden thinks it's the best country in the world, and now they'll get a chance to show off their country.
It's a fantastic country. I mean, I love traveling there for, all the scouting trips, the U18s or U20s, whatever they have. The World Juniors there this year, too. I'm excited for that. It's a beautiful country, fantastic people. Stockholm's a great city, great food, it's just a really fun place.
And the Wild will be playing the Maple Leafs and the Senators on the weekend. Toughest Swede you've ever played against?
Oh man, toughest. I always go to Peter Forsberg. I mean. He was so skilled and smart, and he was tough. He was mean.
Yeah,
like he could hit too. Like, and if he got mad, he was coming. There are guys like Ulf Samuelsson, Kjell Samuelsson back in the day. They were really tough too. But Nick Lidstrom, obviously a great defenseman. He was tough to play against because he was more mentally tough on you because. He wouldn't lay a hand on you, but you feel beaten down after a game. He was just so good, so smart. There's so many great Swedish players over the years.
Although you got the last laugh on Nick Lidstrom in 2009. Yeah, he had the shot on Fleury, the amazing save.
Yeah, and 95.
Yeah, it is funny. That's true too. It is funny that Forsberg just has this mystique in Sweden. Like Eriksson Ek was telling me that Forsberg played in the Mats Zuccarello charity game this summer, and they were teammates, and he was scared to death to even say hello to him. And Forsberg is actually a part owner of his agency. And he still didn't want to go up to him and say hello.
Yeah. So I'm sure they're, he probably idolized him growing up, and he's got a presence about him, that's for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the Wild, Bill. As you mentioned, this is not an exhibition going over there. These are 2 very important games. You guys have been treading water to start the season. What do you make right now of the team?
You know what? That's, I guess, the frustrating thing is they're I think for a good stretch, I don't think we were competing the way we really needed to compete. And I still don't think we're at the top of our game. Just recently against the Rangers, we didn't play the first period, and then we played a great second, then we were okay in the third, inconsistent during games. Buffalo, we put together a great effort, but we couldn't score. We needed a couple key saves, and we didn't get it. So we just need to flat out be a lot better. And I think it starts with our compete level.
Yeah. Obviously, you start off the season poorly just because Jared Spurgeon's out of the lineup. You're captain. You're one of your top 2 best defensemen, most like, not arguably, unarguably. he's back in the lineup now, and it did seem like that Buffalo game that you guys played the other day. I mean, that was as dominant a performance he could play without winning. And he played a big part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a key ingredient in our team. I mean, we need him. It was tough to start the year without him, but we got him back now. He's, Spurge is one of those guys. He's got an elite hockey brain, and he was ready to go. He made a big impact. And like you said, we did everything we could that night. The guys played great. It was just one of those nights that we didn't get what we deserved. There are going to be other nights too where we don't play well and we win.
Right.
So it all kind of evens out. But I would just really like to see a more consistent, high level of competitiveness, and it's in us. And the guys, they care so much and they work so hard, but it's got to get to another level.
With Kirill Kaprizov, I mean, we've seen the best of him 2 years in a row, 2 40-goal seasons. It just seems like right now, even though he's getting pretty much points every night, he's not getting to that interior as much. We even saw it in the last minute the other night. He was playing playmaker rather than being the guy that's trying to score the goal. Well, how do you get him back to being the impactful player that you expect?
Yeah, I think you made a good point. He's been a little too much on the perimeter, especially in crunch time, and we don't want him distributing the puck. We want him shooting it in the net. He's gotten a few goals lately, which is good, but still, his game has always been on the inside, and that's where we need him to get. And I think nobody knows that more than him. But I have seen better play of him lately, and hopefully he just continues to get better.
Same with Boldy. I mean, you need him to be a difference maker. You're paying him the big bucks. And he just, again, feels like he's not being, at times a little too cute and all that.
That's exactly it. And you know what? I think a lot of times when players struggle, I mean, I remember this from my playing days. When you're struggling, you try to make things happen, and it almost snowballs on you. And it gets worse and worse. The best thing you can do is simplify your game. I mean, really dumb it down and just get to work and get your nose dirty. And right now, Matt, you know what? He's not playing his best hockey. I know it'll come out sooner or later, but he's just got to, not be so hard on himself and not try to be so perfect.
Gus has been talking about hard on himself, has been really hard on himself lately, talking to him. It just feels like he can't get traction. There are games where he's playing really well, but at the end of the night, not getting the victories. How do you get him back to the consistent guy that we saw all of last season?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's two things. It's him continuing to work on his game and make sure that he's sharp. He played pretty well the other night. But it's also the team. We need to be better defensively in front of him. We're giving up way too many grade A scoring chances. I don't care if you got Ken Dryden in that or anybody. Like, if you're giving up too many grade A chances, you're not going to give your goalie the best chance to play well. So, again, we don't want to be in too hard on himself. Just continue to work at his game and keep getting better.
Let's talk a little bit about Marc-Andre Fleury. He's 4 wins from tying Patrick Waugh, 5 from passing him for second all time. This is somebody that grew up idolizing both Waugh and Brodeur. We've talked to Brodeur for a story that we're working on, talking to a bunch of other players. You've known Marc-Andre for a while. How deserved is this, and how fun is it to see him still?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what? He is just, outside of being the great human that he is, and everybody always talks about that, he's a hell of a goalie. He's been an amazing goalie for a long, long time in this league. You know what? He's got the stats. He's got the wins. He's got the championships. He's done it all, and he's done it all with like such class, and you just can't say enough good things about Marc-Andre Fleury.
A couple more minutes with the ability. We've started to see the fruits of your labor with prospects. Marco Rossi stepping in, playing really well this season. Brock Faber, the big trade you made with Kevin Fiala, having a great start to his season. Jesper Wallstedt down in the minors, who's in Sweden with you right now. It just feels like Huzinov and Yurov and Ogren and all these guys are going to be coming over, that we're starting in the next couple of years to see these guys step into the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of guys are having good years. It's nice to see that, these guys are finally, like you said, guys like Marcos, guys like Faber, they're really having an impact on our big team. You know, Jesper's time will come. He's playing great down there. It's it's really nice to see. We're going to have more and more guys coming in through the pipeline in these next few years to come.
Does it start even hard for you to be patient? Like, I'm sure you want to see Wallstedt in this lineup, and you'd love to see O'Rourke. We've seen Damon Hunt play well.
Yeah, Damon Hunt played great actually for us. You know what? Yeah, you really want to see them in the lineup, but it's just like, I think Marco has been a good lesson for me, for all our hockey ops guys, coaches. Like, we just really need to be patient. Marco's having a great year right now. He's an NHL player, like an impactful player on our team now, which he couldn't be a year ago. So I think the more patient we can be, the better off our prospects will be and our team will be.
What's your biggest surprise that you've seen so far in the West this year? I mean, Vancouver, one that shocks you coming out of the gate, or maybe not, because I know that you have a lot of respect for Rick Tocchet. Yeah,
I mean, I love Toc. He's a great guy, great coach. But you know what? They have so much talent. I just think it just seems they don't shock me. Like, they're so talented. I think probably Anaheim. Yeah. I mean, Anaheim's had some really good stretches. They're really, kind of seems like they've turned the corner. And you talk about young players being effective, like they've got a ton. So, they're probably one of the biggest surprises.
Yeah. Well, Billy, as always, appreciate it. Looking forward to this trip in Sweden, and we'll see you over there. Maybe we'll share some Swedish meatballs or something.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe they'll share some Swedish meatballs. Michael Russo, great chat with Minnesota Wild GM Bill Guerin. We have two topics that we're going to get to before the end of our show today. One of them is a bit of another developing story with regards to Hockey Canada. We're going to, just as we get the facts right on this one, we're going to put that to the side for now. We're going to talk about another NHL story with regards to the possible change of 3-on-3 rules in overtime. I love 3-on-3. I used to be a fan of the shootout. I just think 3-on-3 is just way better. But now we're at a point where GMs have discussed the idea of changing rules to limit teams from doing that loop back that they continually do in the offensive zone and then going back out, then going back in on 3-on-3. There's potential solutions could be a bit of a law with crossing the red line or the blue line. You can't go back out, or having a shot clock, which I have mentioned previously before. Just got to say, if we get to a point where we're changing these 3-on-3 rules, why do I have a weird feeling that it's just going to mess up 3-on-3?
Well, you say you love 3-on-3. I loved 3-on-3 before coaches ruined it by being coaches. Once after a couple of years, once they figured out that possession was everything and transition was everything, everybody got so conservative. And now every time you see a 3-on-3 overtime, the first 2 or 3 minutes is just the most boring thing you ever saw. And then there's a turnover, and then there's some frenetic action that we're longing for. I mean, look, 3-on-3 is not hockey. We always complain about the shootout not being hockey. Well, neither is 3-on-3. That's not how hockey's supposed to be played. It's already a gimmick. It's just a cool gimmick that we all like. So if you're going to make it a gimmick it up even worse, just to goose it a little bit. Let's have a shot clock. Let's have the red line be a firm line that you can't, no backcourt violations, so to speak. Like, let's do whatever you can to get it back to what it was supposed to be, which is psychotically crazy end-to-end action.
How is 3-on-3 and the format of it not hockey?
I don't know how familiar you are with the sport, but there's usually 5 skaters and a goalie on each side.
Okay, but just power plays exist. Teams play with men short due to penalties and all that.
How often do you see 3-on-3 in actual regulation hockey? You don't.
The whole point is that we have seen teams play with fewer than 5 men. What is this idea that it's not hockey all of a sudden? Look, in fact, when you see that frenetic action, you could argue it's among the best form of the sport we see.
I love it. I'm not complaining about it, but I'm saying, we don't. The beauty of 3-on-3 hockey is we don't have to worry about the purity of it. We've already ripped that Band-Aid off by going to 3-on-3 in overtime. So we don't have to worry about, it's sacred and we can't touch it. We can do whatever we want to it. We can keep adjusting it until it gets better. That's all I'm saying. I want it to get back to what it's supposed to be, which is fan-friendly, player-friendly, goalie-unfriendly hockey. It's gotten so bad. I mean, it's all about just creating a turnover and scoring in transition now. That's all it's become. The Blackhawks, when they had Derek King as coach, he'd put Alex DeBrincat out there with Patrick Kane. He'd have DeBrincat, who's not a center, take the face-off, basically intentionally losing the faceoff because you had a better chance of scoring with Kane in transition than you did with possession. Like it's gotten so bad in terms of how difficult it is to wrestle the puck away from anybody. So let's gimmick it up more and make it more fun.
Would you rather a backcourt violation rule or a shot clock in 3-on-3?
Por qué no los dos? I mean, why not both, right? I mean, let's do it. Like, I like both of those. Like, maybe even make it once you're inside the blue line, you can't leave the zone with possession.
Okay.
Like, let's really cram it in there. Let's get the action going, because all we get is these guys circling back and circling back and circling back, waiting for the perfect zone entry, waiting for the perfect cross seam pass. I want it to be frenetic. Like, it should be nonstop chaos.
And I want it at 10 minutes too. I think the idea that it's just 5 minutes, and I want it continuous, to be honest with you, more than just 5 or 10 minutes. Like,
you want no whistles?
I mean, you need whistles when you can get whistles, but like, don't let it get to a point where we have to go to overtime in order for us to see a winner. We should still have a winner. I don't believe in ties, especially in that sport, but I think if you have it until somebody wins, someone's going to eventually score. But if you have those rules in where you have a shot clock, I would probably personally just rather a shot clock, but also at the same time, maybe just like you, why not just have both? Anything to make that part of the game, which, again, I think when you see both teams going back and forth, that might be the best form of the sport you can get.
Yes.
And there's a reason why people complain so much about it going straight to a shootout. Like, we agree. I know we're yelling about it, but we agree.
And you talk to any player in the league, and they'll all tell you the same thing. Yeah, it's tiring, but I'd still rather have 10 minutes of 3-on-3 than go to a shootout. Nobody likes the shootout. Nobody.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like the shootout at the start seemed like a good idea. Like the Merrick Malik between the legs is a great moment we'll remember forever. But I think it's just because of how OT rules are now, where it has just become so much of a buzzkill.
Yeah.
That has played such a huge role in why the shootout has lost its luster.
Yeah, and it's just, you go to the other sports, and baseball is doing things to speed up their extra innings with the ghost runner on second, which I hate that they call it a ghost runner because there's actually a dude there. But, they're everyone's gimmicking things up, but they're not going to the length that hockey has gone to. You're not seeing a home run derby to decide a game. You're not seeing a field goal kicking. I mean, NFL overtime is the worst thing in the world. Like, I don't know why they don't just adopt the college model, which is the best.
Yes.
College football overtime is better than NHL overtime, and I love NHL overtime. But you put them in the NFL, fine. Put them at the 40-yard line instead of the 25 and just go from there. But this is what we're doing now because we don't want ties. We don't want games decided by, stationary things like a shootout. You want it decided by something that at least resembles the sport. And 3-on-3 hockey, while not hockey, at least resembles the sport of hockey.
We're getting in some a YouTube comment here. Prakash, I also want 10 minutes, but Gary Bettman, of all people, had a good reason why it can't be 10 minutes. They would have to bring the Zamboni back out.
Just skate in the crappy ice like everyone else in the world does, you prima donnas.
Oh, no. The Zamboni driver has to work overtime? Oh,
is that
no.
What it is? There's not enough hockey-related revenue to pay the Zamboni driver for another cut.
Oh, no. How is he going to feed his family doing these extra shifts in overtime? Like, give me a break.
Just play. Just do another dry scrape and let them play.
Yeah, just hire some of those old hosers, as they used to call them, with the just put the water on the ice. If we're at
is that where the term comes from?
I believe yes. What's funny?
Kidding. I learned something today.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? I learned that in grad school because my American prof asked me about these two Canadian characters I had no idea about, Bob and Doug McKenzie, and after that he explained to me the concept of hosers.
I thought you were going to say Terrence and Phillip from South Park.
Oh no, I was never a South Park guy for whatever reason. I just that show. I never gravitated to that show.
At its peak, it was almost The Simpsons, almost.
Yeah, I don't know if anything could truly be The Simpsons, Mark. We have one last story we're going to get to. Hockey Canada. This is just coming in over in the last few minutes. Players from Hockey Canada's 2018 World Junior team have appealed a ruling from an independent adjudicative panel that was launched to investigate and determine national team sanctions. Of course, this is in relation to the 2018, the allegations around that 2018 team involving a group assault. The ruling was made, but with appeal, Hockey Canada says details can't be shared now. Again, this is just coming in under the wire over the last few minutes. Hockey Canada, that story we've been following, thanks to the work of Katie Strang as well. If you see on TSN, Request Head has done some work on this as well. Mark, just very quick thoughts on the fact that we're at this point with the Hockey Canada scandal.
Look, I know there's a process, and I don't know exactly what that process entails, but it's outrageous that we don't have names yet, right? Like, there are people playing in the NHL right now that may or may not have done something truly abhorrent, and we don't know who they are, and they're getting paid and they're getting cheered, and then there's other players who were not involved who are under a cloud of suspicion just because they were on that 2018 Hockey Canada team. This has gone on long enough. Every Friday at like 4:45, I start getting twitchy, waiting for the news dump, knowing that I'm gonna have to write some kind of thing off at from a national perspective, because they're definitely going to try to dump it in the middle of the night as much as they can. But I just, it's really uncomfortable that we know what might be out there and we don't have names yet. That there are people in the NHL that probably don't belong in the NHL, and they are being cheered and revered and praised, and every single player on that team. We're all looking at them a little askew, right? We're like wondering, well, what if that's one of the guys? And that's not fair to them either. We need to know the results. This is a long time now we've been waiting on this, and we need to know results. We need to know names, and we need to take action against those names.
Very well said. I should mention all players from the 2018 national junior team remain suspended by Hockey Canada and are currently ineligible to play, coach, officiate, or volunteer with Hockey Canada sanctioned programs. Obviously, we will have further reporting from Katie Strang and the rest of our athletic team on this story. And with that, I think that's just about going to do it for our Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. A bit of a tighter one than normal. So kind of up and down in terms of some of the topics that we were able to get
very
to
uplifting
today.
Start and end, wasn't it?
Yeah, but hopefully change for the better prevails in some respects. Yeah, Mark, thanks so much for hanging with me yesterday and today. Appreciate this, man.
I'm just here to listen to you pronounce names in French. It's just the best thing in the world.
Is there like a name like you would like for me to pronounce in French in particular? That seems to enamor you so much.
I don't know them. That's the problem. Is I Americanize them like a dumbass that I am. So I just like hearing you say them.
Like an Alexis Lafrenière.
That was the one yesterday. Like I was like I needed to go get a drink after hearing that.
Does that mean my voice is mellifluous?
No.
Okay,
sorry.
Fine.
That's that. Only Ian Mendes gets to be mellifluous. Your accent though is impeccable and beautiful.
Merci, Mark Lazerus. By the way, speaking of Ian Mendes, Sean Gentili and Jesse will be in North America with Ian Mendes tomorrow. Who will be in Sweden. We will have a show tomorrow back at our regular time of 2:30. By the way, for those who are still missing Ian Mendes after he missed out on the Monday and the Tuesday episode.
Can you imagine tuning in for Ian Mendes and getting me? Just the letdown you must have as a listener. My God, those poor people. I apologize to all of you.
I'm so glad you were able to do that and be so considerate of our audience, Mark. So nice of you to do that. In all seriousness, thank you to everyone who got to listen to us over the last 2 days. Thank you for listening to the Athletic Hockey Show. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a rating and review. We would really appreciate it. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theathletic hockey show. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace.